Okay, let's get into this. We're talking about an incredible story of power, conquest, and maybe the most ambitious data project of the entire Middle Ages.
We really are. We're looking at the year 1086 and this ancient book that William the Conqueror made to get a grip on his new kingdom,
The Domesday Book.
the one and only.
But to get why he even needed it, you have to go back 20 years, back to 1067.
Right, the year everything changed. William, the Duke of Normandy, crosses the English Channel.
He defeats King Harold at the Battle of Hastings, and then on Christmas Day, he's crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey.
And that wasn't just, a new guy on the throne. It was a complete revolution. William was a foreigner. He spoke Norman French, which was, well, it was gibberish to the local Anglo-Saxon.
He was an occupier, basically, not a chosen successor, and his hold on power must have been incredibly shaky.
Oh, absolutely. He knew he was sitting on a powder keg, so he had to show his authority and fast.
We see that with the military side of things, don't we? All those intimidating stone castles he built everywhere.
Exactly. They were physical symbols of Norman power, scarring the landscape. But the castles were just one part of it. The whole country's focus shifted.
How do you mean?
Well, before William, England looked north, towards Scandinavia. After 1066, England gets pulled into the orbit of mainland Europe. Its politics, its economy, everything.
But it's one thing to win the battle. It's a whole other thing to govern a country that, frankly, doesn't want you there.
And that was his problem. He had this huge, unfamiliar country, and he didn't know who owned what, where the money was, or who he could even trust.
He needed a master list, an inventory of his new kingdom.
That's it. And that's what led to the Great Survey, as it was officially called. The goal was total knowledge, because knowledge is power.
So he wanted to know exactly what land and what wealth was out there.
Yes. And this wasn't just for fun. There was a very clear twofold purpose behind this whole project.
Okay, what were the two main drivers?
First, money. He had a massive army to pay for, a new government to run. He needed a tax system that was efficient and basically cheat-proof.
So it was an accounting tool.
A massive one. But the second purpose was all about power and control.
How so?
By making everyone declare what they owned, William made sure no one, especially his own powerful Norman barons, could hide wealth from him. It was a check on their power.
Like a huge internal audit of the entire country.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And you can see how serious he was from the level of detail they had to collect. They didn't just ask for the current value of the land.
Right. They also had to find out what it was worth before the invasion.
Yes, back in the time of the previous king, Edward.
Why bother comparing those two dates?
Because that comparison showed him the economic damage of his own conquest. If a piece of land was suddenly worth much less, it probably meant it was ravaged during a battle or a revolt. It was a progress report on his kingdom.
That is incredibly systematic for the 11th century.
It was unheard of. It's probably one of the most organized government projects of the entire Middle Ages.
Which brings up the logistics. I mean, how do they even do this? No computers, no good maps, terrible roads.
Well, William sent out teams of his most trusted men, royal commissioners. These weren't just clerks. They were powerful bishops and lords. They carried the king's authority.
And they went to every corner of the country.
Every shire, every village. And they would hold these huge public meetings that everyone had to attend.
Imagine that. The king's men showing up in your tiny village.
And the process was designed to get the truth through, well, fear. Everyone, from the local priests to the farmers, had to swear a holy oath to tell the absolute truth.
A holy oath on the gospel. That wasn't something you took lightly back then.
No. Lying under oath was risking your immortal soul. So the spiritual pressure was immense.
And they had a way to double-check the answers.
They did. They used local juries, made up of both Normans and Englishmen, who would have to confirm the information. Your neighbors were checking your story.
So you couldn't really get away with lying.
Very difficult, too.
And they weren't just asking, how much land do you have? They were after tiny details.
Oh, the level of detail is just staggering. It was an inventory of everything. They measured the size of the woods for fuel, the number of meadows for grazing animals.
I read they even counted things like fish ponds and water mills.
Yes, because those were resources that generated income. And they counted every single plow.
Every plow. Why?
Because if you know how many plows are working, you know how much food that region can produce. It tells you exactly how much tax it can support.
Wow. And it went down to individual animals, too.
Yep. They recorded how many pigs and sheep each person owned. Every last one. This was a complete economic x-ray of the kingdom. No one could hide.
So all this information gets collected on scraps of parchment all over the country. What happens to it then?
All of those messy notes get sent to one central place, Winchester,
Which was the capital at the time.
the administrative heart of the kingdom. And there, a team of scribes had the enormous job of compiling it all into one official permanent record.
That must have been a nightmare trying to make sense of all those different reports.
A huge data processing job. And they organized it very carefully, first by county, then by the main landowner in that area.
And it wasn't written in English.
No, the whole thing was in a specific type of government Latin that made it official and understood across William's whole empire from Normandy to England.
Okay, this brings us to the name. The government called it the Great Survey, but the people, they called it something else.
They did. They called it the Domesday Book.
Which comes from Doomsday, the Day of Judgment. That sounds terrifying.
And that was the point. For them, the Day of Judgment was when the final, unchangeable record of your life was read out. And that's what this book was like.
What do you mean?
It meant that once a fact was written down in William's book, it was legally final. You could not argue with it in court. If the book said your neighbor owned that field, he owned it. End of story.
So the name itself was a symbol of the king's absolute power.
The ultimate symbol. The king's word was now written down, and it was law.
So beyond the raw data, what does the book tell us about what life was actually like for people back then?
It paints a picture of a world that runs on farming. Most people lived in small villages, and their lives were ruled by the seasons. You worked from sunrise to sunset just to survive.
And you can see the social structure really clearly, can't you? The different classes of people?
Yes, from the few freemen down to the serfs, who were basically tied to the land. They weren't free to leave.
Life was tough. You grow your own food, raise your own animals.
But a big chunk of it had to be given to the local lord.
Hmm.
You had an obligation. You were living on his land, so you owed him food or labor or both.
Which is basically the blueprint for the feudal system in England.
It's the perfect administrative record of it. You see the whole pyramid. At the very top, you had the king, who technically owns all the land.
And he gives out huge chunks of it to his most loyal followers, the barons.
But it's not a gift. It's a contract. In return for the land, the barons had to provide him with knights and soldiers for his army.
So it's a military-based system.
Entirely. And the barons then give smaller pieces of land to knights or peasants, who in turn owe them labor or protection. Everyone is locked into this rigid hierarchy.
And the book makes it clear that land was everything. Land was wealth.
The ultimate form of wealth. And the book shows the king kept the lion's share. William personally owned about a fifth of all the land in England.
The book also has some grim details hidden in the numbers about the violence of the conquest.
It does. When you see the value of an estate has plummeted compared to before 1066, it's often a sign that William's armies marched through there, burning villages to crush a rebellion. It's a map of economic warfare.
But going back to survival, there are some amazing details in there. You mentioned they counted oxen for plows and sheep for wool.
Right, the absolute essentials. But one of my favorite details is that they also counted beehives.
Beehives? Why on earth would the king's surveyors care about beehives?
Think about it. What did people use to make food sweet?
Oh, there was no sugar.
Exactly. Sugar was basically unheard of. Honey was the only sweetener they had for food, for drinks like mead. It was a vital resource. Counting beehives was like counting the national sugar supply.
That's incredible. So when you put it all together, what is the Domesday Book's real legacy almost 1,000 years on?
I mean, its importance is just immense. No other country in Europe had anything like this. It's a unique, detailed snapshot of a medieval society.
And historians still use it today for everything from studying population to tracing the history of village names.
It's the foundation for so much of what we know about that period. And it really tells you who William was. He died in 1087, just after it was finished.
He wasn't just a warrior.
Not at all. He was a brilliant administrator. He knew that to truly rule a country, you need more than an army. You need information. You need records.
And his rule completely reshaped England, mixing Norman French culture with the old Anglo-Saxon ways.
That mix is what eventually created modern England, and even the modern English language. And this book was the tool he used to manage that transformation. It shows that control isn't just won with a sword, it's maintained with a pen.
It's just amazing to think that this book, written almost 1,000 years ago to count every pig and beehive, is still preserved in the National Archives in London. It's maybe the ultimate example of a government using data to establish absolute control.
And that leaves a pretty big question for all of us, doesn't it? If the ultimate power back then came from a book that defined reality, where does the ultimate power to define reality lie today?
Good luck with your studies.